The morning sun felt warm against her skin as Maya Richardson stepped out of her car, taking in a deep breath of fresh air. It was one of those perfect spring mornings where everything just felt right. The sky was that brilliant shade of blue that only comes after a few days of rain, and there wasn't a single cloud in sight. Maya stretched her arms above her head, feeling the tension from the week finally starting to melt away. Behind her, two sets of eager eyes watched her every movement through the car window. Titan and Nova, her two German shepherds, were practically vibrating with excitement. Their tails wagged so hard that their entire back end swayed with the motion. Maya couldn't help but smile as she opened the back door. All right, calm down, you two," she said with a laugh, but her voice was full of affection. "We've got all morning." The dogs bounded out of the car with the kind of joy that only dogs can express. For a moment, they looked like any other excited pets ready for a walk in the park. But then something shifted. Without Maya saying a single word, both dogs fell into perfect heel position on either side of her, their bodies aligned, their focus complete. It was like watching a switch flip. One second they were playful pets, the next they were trained professionals. Maya had been a K9 officer for almost 8 years now, and days like this were rare. Her job was demanding, often dangerous, and it took a special kind of bond to work with police dogs. Titan and Nova weren't just her partners at work. They were family. They lived with her, slept at the foot of her bed, and knew her better than most people ever would. Today was her first day off in 2 weeks, and she decided to spend it doing something simple. Just a walk through Riverside Park, a quiet spot about 20 minutes from her house. She'd been here a few times before and loved how peaceful it was. The park had wide walking trails that wound through clusters of old oak trees, open fields where kids played soccer, and a small pond where ducks gathered. As they started down the main path, Maya popped in her earbuds and selected her favorite playlist. She deserved this. Just a few hours of not thinking about work, not thinking about the stress, not thinking about anything except the feeling of the sun on her face and the steady rhythm of her feet hitting the pavement. The park was busier than she expected for a weekday morning. A group of elderly folks were doing Tai Chi near the pond, their movements slow and graceful. A young mother pushed a stroller while talking on her phone, her toddler babbling happily. Several joggers passed by, some offering friendly nods. Maya nodded back, feeling a sense of contentment wash over her. Titan and Nova walked perfectly beside her, not needing leashes. In this county, trained service and working dogs were allowed off-leash as long as they remained under voice control. And these two were as controlled as dogs could get. They'd been through thousands of hours of training. They could track suspects through dense woods, detect narcotics in crowded airports, and protect their handler without hesitation. But right now they were just enjoying the walk. Their tongues hanging out slightly, their eyes bright and alert but relaxed. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, stopped in his tracks when he saw the dogs. His eyes went wide with wonder. "Mom, look at those big dogs," he shouted, pointing. His mother looked up and Maya could see the moment of calculation in her eyes. But then the woman noticed how calm and well-behaved Titan and Nova were, and she smiled. "They're beautiful," she called out to Maya. Maya pulled out one earbud and smiled back. "Thanks, they're sweethearts. Can we pet them?" the boy asked, already starting to move forward. "Not today, buddy," Maya said gently. "They're working dogs and they need to stay focused. But you can wave at them." The boy's face fell for just a second, but then he waved enthusiastically. "Hi, dogs." Both Titan and Nova's ears perked up, but they remained in position, perfectly disciplined. These were the moments Maya loved. The simple, normal moments where she was just a woman walking her dogs, where nobody knew she was a police officer, where she wasn't Sergeant Richardson but just Maya. At work, she constantly had to prove herself. Being a black woman in law enforcement came with its own set of challenges. There were the older guys who still thought women didn't belong in uniform. There were the people who assumed she'd gotten her position through some kind of quota, rather than through years of hard work and dedication. And there were the citizens who looked at her with suspicion or fear rather than respect. But here, in this moment, none of that mattered. She was just another person enjoying a beautiful day. They walked for another 15 minutes, following the trail as it curved around the pond and through a grove of trees. Birds sang overhead, and somewhere in the distance Maya could hear children laughing as they played on the playground equipment. This neighborhood was nice, she thought. Really nice. the kind of place where houses had big yards and people probably knew their neighbors' names. It was different from where she'd grown up, different from where she lived now. She checked her fitness watch. They'd gone about 2 miles already. Maybe they'd do one more loop around the park and then head back. She had groceries to buy, laundry to do, all the regular life stuff that piled up when you worked 60-hour weeks. As they rounded a bend in the path, Maya noticed a patrol car driving slowly along the park's access road. It was from the local precinct, not hers. She didn't think much of it at first. Officers often did patrol checks of public parks. It was standard procedure, especially in the mornings when the parks opened. But then the car slowed down even more. Maya could see the officer in the passenger seat looking directly at her. She felt a small flutter of unease in her stomach but pushed it away. She was doing nothing wrong. Just walking her dogs in a public park. That was it. The patrol car continued past them and Maya let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. See, she told herself, nothing to worry about. Just your imagination. She turned her attention back to her music, letting the beat wash over her. Titan and Nova continued their steady pace beside her, their paws hitting the ground in a rhythm that matched her own steps. Everything was fine. Everything was perfect, actually, but then she heard it. The sound of a car door slamming. Maya looked over her shoulder and felt her heart sink. The patrol car had stopped about 50 feet behind them and was now parked at an angle on the access road. 2 officers were getting out, and even from this distance she could see they were looking right at her. The peaceful morning suddenly felt different. The warmth of the sun seemed less comforting. The sounds of the park faded into background noise as Maya's training kicked in, making her hyper-aware of everything happening around her. Titan and Nova sensed the change immediately. Their postures shifted ever so slightly, their ears rotating to track the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. They didn't break their position, didn't make a sound, but Maya could feel their attention sharpen. She pulled out her earbuds and stopped walking, turning to face the approaching officers. Maybe they just wanted to ask a question. Maybe there was some kind of incident in the park she didn't know about. Maybe this was nothing. But deep down, in that place where experience and instinct lived, Maya knew better. She stood still, keeping her body language open and non-threatening. Her badge and ID were in her jacket pocket, easily accessible if needed. The dogs remained at her side, their presence steady and calm. Whatever was about to happen, Maya told herself to stay professional, stay calm. She'd dealt with difficult situations before. This would be fine. The 2 officers were getting closer now, their strides purposeful. One was older, probably in his mid-40s, with a stocky build and gray touching his temples. The other was younger, maybe mid-20s, tall and lean, with the kind of nervous energy that came with being relatively new to the job. The older officer's hand rested casually near his belt, and his expression was hard to read behind his sunglasses. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. Had there been a crime reported nearby? Were they looking for someone? But if that was the case, why hadn't they just driven past or given a friendly wave? The way they were approaching, with that specific kind of focused intensity, told her this wasn't a casual interaction. She glanced around the park. The mother with the stroller had moved on. The elderly Tai Chi group was too far away to notice what was happening. A jogger passed by on the other side of the pond, completely oblivious. Maya suddenly felt very alone, despite being in a public space in broad daylight. Stay calm, she whispered to herself so quietly that only Titan and Nova could hear. Their ears flicked toward her voice, acknowledging her words, but they didn't move. Good boys, good girl. They were reading the situation just like she'd trained them to, waiting for her command, ready to respond to whatever came next. The officers were close now, maybe 20 feet away. Maya could see their faces more clearly. The older one's jaw was set, his mouth pressed into a thin line. The younger one looked less certain, his eyes darting between Maya and his partner as if waiting for a cue on how to proceed. Maya took a slow, steady breath and waited. This was her day off. She was just walking her dogs. She had every right to be here. But she also knew that rights and reality didn't always match up, especially for someone who looked like her in a neighborhood like this. The thought made her angry, but she pushed the emotion down. Anger wouldn't help. Not now. The peaceful morning she'd been enjoying just minutes ago felt like a distant memory. In its place was a familiar tension, the kind she'd felt too many times before, both in uniform and out of it. That feeling of having to prove she belonged, having to justify her presence, having to work twice as hard to be seen as half as legitimate. But she was a police officer. A decorated one. She'd earned her badge through years of service, through long nights and dangerous calls, through building trust with her K9 partners and proving her worth over and over again. That had to count for something, didn't it? The older officer reached her first, his boots crunching against the gravel path. Up close, Maya could see the name tag on his uniform read Dawson. His partner hung back slightly, positioned at an angle that cops used when they wanted to keep an eye on everything. Standard procedure, Maya recognized. She'd done it 1,000 times herself. "Morning," Maya said, keeping her voice friendly but neutral. She could feel her heart beating faster, but she kept her hands visible and her posture relaxed. Dawson didn't return the greeting. Instead, his eyes swept over her, then down to the dogs, then back to her face. "You live around here?" he asked. Not "how are you" or "nice morning" or any of the pleasantries people usually exchanged. Just straight to the question that made Maya's stomach tighten. "I'm just out for a walk," she replied, choosing her words carefully. "Is there a problem, officer?" "I asked if you live around here." His tone was harder now, more demanding. The younger officer, whose name tag read Martinez, shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He looked uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything. Maya felt a familiar frustration rising in her chest. She'd been a cop long enough to know exactly what was happening here. She'd seen it happen to others, though she'd hoped, naively perhaps, that it wouldn't happen to her. Not in broad daylight. Not in a public park where she had every legal right to be. "I'm walking my dogs in a public park," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Is there something specific you need?" Dawson's jaw clenched. "We got a call about someone matching your description, acting suspicious in the area." "Where are your dogs' leashes?" Maya blinked. A call? She'd been here for over 30 minutes, and the only people she'd interacted with were the mother and her child. And that had been nothing but pleasant. And as for leashes, well, that was easy to explain. "These are trained working dogs," she explained, gesturing to Titan and Nova, who remained perfectly still beside her. "They're under voice control, which is legal in this county for certified service and working animals. I have their documentation if you need to see it." "Working dogs," Dawson repeated, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Right, and I'm supposed to just take your word for that?" Martinez finally spoke up, his voice quieter than his partner's. "They do seem pretty well behaved." Dawson shot him a look that could have frozen water, and Martinez went quiet again. Maya noticed the dynamic between them. The rookie was following the lead of the veteran, even though something about this clearly didn't sit right with him. She'd seen that before too. Good cops staying silent when they should speak up, afraid to contradict their partners, afraid to rock the boat. "Look," Maya said, reaching slowly toward her jacket pocket. "I can show you my identification and the dog's certification papers. Everything's legal here. Keep your hands where I can see them." Dawson barked, his hand moving to his belt. Maya froze, her hand still inches from her pocket. A chill ran down her spine despite the warm sunshine. This was escalating way too fast. Beside her, she felt Titan and Nova tense. They'd picked up on the aggression in Dawson's voice, the sudden threatening movement, but they held their positions, waiting for her command. Good. The last thing she needed was for them to react. "My badge is in my pocket," Maya said clearly, her hand still suspended in the air. "I'm a police officer. K9 Unit, Metro PD. My name is Maya Richardson, and I can prove everything I'm telling you if you'll just let me reach for my identification." For a second, something flickered across Dawson's face. Surprise, doubt, but it disappeared quickly, replaced by that same hard skepticism. "Sure you are," he said. "And I'm the mayor. Martinez called us in. Get me a wants and warrants check." Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You're not even going to look at my credentials?" "Anyone can buy a fake badge online these days," Dawson said. He circled around her slowly, eyeing the dogs with suspicion. "These dogs are aggressive. They're not on leashes. You're in a public park where families bring their children. And now you're telling me some story about being a cop? Lady, I've heard every lie in the book." "This isn't a lie," Maya said, her frustration finally bleeding into her voice. She'd been patient, she'd been calm, she'd done everything right. And still, here she was, being treated like a criminal for walking her dogs. "I work out of the Metro Precinct on 5th and Hamilton. My captain is James Torres. You can call and verify right now." What I'm going to do, Dawson said, stepping closer to her, is ask you to put your hands behind your back while we figure out what's really going on here. Excuse me? Maya's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. On what grounds? I haven't broken any laws. I've done nothing wrong. You're being uncooperative with a police investigation. An investigation into what exactly? What crime are you investigating? Dawson's face reddened. Don't get smart with me. There are leash laws in this county, which don't apply to certified working dogs, as I already explained. Maya shot back. She could feel the situation spiraling out of control, but she couldn't seem to stop it. This was absurd. This was beyond absurd. A couple walking by slowed down, noticing the confrontation. The woman whispered something to her husband, and he pulled out his phone. Good, Maya thought. Let them record this. Let there be witnesses to this ridiculous harassment. Martinez cleared his throat. Dawson, maybe we should just check her ID. If she's telling the truth about being on the job. Did I ask for your opinion, rookie? Dawson snapped. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what I'm looking at, and there it was. The real issue, Maya could hear it in his voice, see it in the way he looked at her. It didn't matter that she was a police officer. It didn't matter that she'd done nothing wrong. What mattered to him was that she was a black woman in a neighborhood where he decided she didn't belong. She'd dealt with racism before. In small ways and big ways, in subtle comments and overt actions. She'd faced it from civilians and, heartbreakingly, from fellow officers. But she'd never expected it to happen like this. So blatantly, so aggressively, on what should have been a peaceful morning walk. I'm going to give you one more chance, Maya said. Her voice cold now, all pretense of friendliness gone. Look at my badge. Call my precinct. Verify what I'm telling you. Because if you try to arrest me without cause, you're going to have a very serious problem. Is that a threat? Dawson moved closer, invading her personal space in a way that was clearly designed to intimidate. And that's when it happened. That's when everything changed. Titan, who had been statue still up until that moment, let out a deep rumbling growl. Not a vicious snarl, but a warning. The kind of sound that said very clearly, back off. At the same moment, Nova shifted her position, moving slightly forward to place herself more directly between Maya and the approaching officer. Dawson jumped back, his hand going to his weapon. Those dogs are aggressive. Martinez, call for backup. We've got a dangerous situation here. No, Maya shouted. They're not aggressive, they're protecting me because you're being threatening. Stand down, both of you. She gave a subtle hand signal and both dogs immediately sat, though their eyes never left Dawson. But the damage was done. Dawson was already on his radio, his voice urgent and exaggerated. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need backup at Riverside Park, north entrance. Subject with 2 large, aggressive dogs refusing to comply with lawful orders. Possible 10-10, Maya's heart sank. A 10-10 meant a fight in progress. He was lying, making it sound like she was resisting, like the dogs were out of control. And now more officers would come, and this whole situation would get even worse. She looked at Martinez, hoping to see some flicker of support, some recognition that this had gone too far. The young officer met her eyes for just a second, and she saw it there. Guilt, uncertainty, but not enough courage to speak up. Around them, more people had stopped to watch. A jogger stood frozen on the path. An older man had his phone up, recording. Maya was simultaneously grateful for the witnesses and humiliated that this was happening at all. This is wrong, she said quietly, more to herself than to the officers. This is so wrong. Titan and Nova pressed closer to her legs, offering silent support. These dogs, who had tracked down dangerous criminals, who had saved lives, who had earned more commendations than some human officers, were now being called aggressive. And she, a sergeant with 8 years of exemplary service, was being treated like a threat, in the distance. Maya could already hear sirens. The sirens grew louder, and Maya felt her professional training warring with her personal emotions. Part of her wanted to stay calm, to let this play out, to trust that the truth would come out. But another part of her, the part that had experienced too many moments like this throughout her life, knew better than to rely on hope alone. She pulled her phone from her pocket slowly, deliberately, making sure both officers could see exactly what she was doing. I'm going to record this, she announced clearly. For everyone's protection. Put that phone down, Dawson ordered, stepping forward again. No, Maya said firmly. I have every legal right to record this interaction. You know that as well as I do. Titan let out another low warning sound and Maya gave him a quick hand signal. He quieted immediately, but his eyes never left Dawson. Nova had positioned herself at a perfect 45-degree angle, the exact stance they'd practiced hundreds of times for crowd control situations. These dogs weren't being aggressive. They were doing their jobs, protecting their handler from a perceived threat. If Dawson had any real K9 experience, he would have recognized the behavior for what it was. Professional, controlled, textbook perfect actually, but he either didn't recognize it or chose not to. 2 more patrol cars pulled up, their lights flashing. 4 officers emerged and Maya's heart sank further. The more people involved, the more complicated this would get. Officers tended to back each other up, even when they were wrong. She knew that. She'd seen it happen. She'd even been guilty of it herself once or twice early in her career before she learned to speak up. One of the new arrivals was a woman, probably in her late 30s, with sergeant stripes on her uniform. She took in the scene quickly, her eyes moving from Dawson to Maya to the dogs to the small crowd of onlookers that had gathered. Her expression was professional, unreadable. "What's the situation?" she asked Dawson. "Subject refuses to comply with lawful orders," Dawson said, his voice taking on an official tone. "2 large dogs off leash in violation of county ordinance. When I attempted to make contact, the dogs became aggressive. She claims to be a police officer but refuses to provide proper identification." Maya couldn't stay quiet anymore. "That's not true. That's not even close to what happened." The sergeant turned to look at her and Maya met her eyes directly. "I'm Sergeant Maya Richardson, K9 Unit, Metro PD. I told Officer Dawson multiple times that I would show him my credentials, but he refused to look at them. These dogs are certified police K9s, which makes them exempt from leash laws. I've broken no laws and I've been nothing but cooperative." "She's lying," Dawson interjected. "Probably stolen badge, fake papers, the whole 9 yards. I've seen it before." The female sergeant's eyes narrowed slightly. Maya couldn't tell if it was aimed at her or at Dawson. "Let me see your identification," she said to Maya. Finally. Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out her badge wallet, flipping it open to reveal her police credentials. The sergeant took it, examining it carefully. Maya watched her face, looking for any sign of what she was thinking. "Metro PD," the sergeant said slowly. She looked at the badge, then at Maya, then at the dogs. "K9 Unit." "Yes, ma'am," Maya said. "You can call my precinct. Captain James Torres. He'll verify everything." One of the bystanders, an older man with silver hair, spoke up from the edge of the gathering crowd. "I recorded the whole thing," he said, holding up his phone. "She didn't do anything wrong. She was just walking her dogs. Your officer there," he pointed at Dawson. "He's been harassing her from the start." "Sir, I need you to step back," one of the other officers said. "I will not step back," the man replied, his voice strong. "I'm a retired attorney and I know my rights. I'm standing on public property recording a public interaction. And what I saw was profiling, plain and simple." Dawson's face went red. "That's not—" "Save it," the female sergeant cut him off. She was still looking at Maya's badge. Then she turned to Martinez. "Officer Martinez, what's your account of what happened here?" Martinez looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. He glanced at Dawson, then at the sergeant, then down at his boots. We were doing a routine patrol and—" "The truth, Martinez," the sergeant said, her tone leaving no room for evasion. There was a long pause. Maya could see the internal struggle playing out on the young officer's face. Career preservation versus doing the right thing. It was a choice every cop had to make at some point. There was no call. Martinez finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dawson wanted to make a stop. He said she looked out of place." The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't quite exploded yet. Maya felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. Vindication because the truth was finally coming out. Sadness because this was exactly what she'd suspected all along. The sergeant's jaw tightened. "Officer Dawson, step over here now." As Dawson moved away, still protesting, the sergeant handed Maya's badge back to her. "I apologize for this, Sergeant Richardson. This never should have happened." Maya took her badge, but the apology felt hollow. Never should have happened. That was the understatement of the year. "What happens now?" she asked. "I'm going to call your captain to verify as you suggested. Standard procedure. But based on what I've seen and heard, I believe you." The sergeant paused, then added more quietly, "I'm Lisa Chen, by the way, Sergeant 3rd District. Maya, she replied, though Chen already knew her name. It felt important somehow to introduce themselves properly, like human beings instead of just uniforms and badge numbers. Chen pulled out her radio and stepped away to make the call. Maya stood there, surrounded by police cars and officers, feeling surreal about the whole situation. Titan and Nova had relaxed slightly, sensing that the immediate threat had passed, but they remained alert and close to her. A young woman from the crowd approached slowly. "Are you okay?" she asked Maya. That was scary to watch. "I'm fine," Maya said automatically, though she wasn't sure if that was true. "Thank you for staying." "I got video too," the woman said. "On my phone. If you need it." Maya nodded. "Can you send it to me? Or give your information to Sergeant Chen over there." She gestured toward Chen, who was still on her radio. More people were coming forward now, offering their recordings, their accounts of what they'd seen. It was touching in a way, but also frustrating. Maya was a police officer. She shouldn't need a crowd of civilians to validate her innocence. Her badge should have been enough. Her word should have been enough, but it wasn't. And that reality stung more than she wanted to admit. Chen came back, her expression serious. "I just spoke with Captain Torres. He's on his way here personally. He was, pretty upset when I told him what happened." That was an understatement, Maya was sure. Torres was protective of his unit, especially his K9 officers. He'd fought hard to get funding for the program, to get the dogs trained properly, to make sure his people had the resources they needed. And he'd mentored Maya personally when she first joined the unit, helping her navigate the challenges of being one of the few women in K9 work. "How long until he gets here?" Maya asked. "Maybe 10 minutes. He said he was already in the area." Chen hesitated, then added, "He also said the chief is coming with him." Great. Now the chief of police was going to show up to a routine park visit that had turned into a circus. Maya could already imagine how this would play out. There would be apologies, promises of investigation, maybe some disciplinary action, but would anything really change? She looked over at Dawson, who was talking animatedly with one of the other officers, his hands gesturing wildly. He looked angry, defensive, not ashamed, not embarrassed about what he'd done, just angry that he'd been called out on it. Martinez stood apart from everyone, looking miserable. Maya almost felt sorry for him. Almost, he'd made his choices too. Staying silent was its own form of participation. "Can I go?" Maya asked Chen. "Or do I need to stay until my captain gets here?" Chen considered this. "I think it would be better if you stayed. For the record, if nothing else. But you're not being detained. You're free to go if you want." Maya thought about it. Part of her wanted to leave, to just walk away from this entire mess and go home. But another part of her knew she needed to see this through. Not just for herself, but for everyone else who'd been in this situation without a badge to protect them. Without dogs trained to defend them. Without witnesses recording on their phones. How many other people had Dawson stopped? How many had he harassed without anyone around to call him out on it? "I'll stay," Maya said. Titan leaned against her leg, offering silent comfort. Nova sat down on her other side, perfectly positioned as always. These dogs had her back in ways that went beyond training. They were her partners, her family, her friends. The crowd was starting to disperse now that the immediate drama had passed, though several people remained, apparently determined to see how this ended. The retired attorney was still there, his phone still recording. Good. Let him record it all. In the distance, Maya heard more sirens approaching. That would be Torres and the chief. She straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and prepared herself for whatever came next. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot, but at least the truth was starting to come out. That had to count for something. 2 unmarked vehicles pulled into the park, moving faster than was probably safe for a public space. Maya recognized the first one immediately. It was Torres's SUV, the one with the dent in the back bumper from where a suspect's car had clipped it during a pursuit 2 years ago. He'd never gotten it fixed, said it was a badge of honor. Captain James Torres stepped out of the driver's side, and even from a distance, Maya could see the anger radiating off him. He was a stocky man in his 50s with dark hair going gray at the temples, and a no-nonsense demeanor that had earned him respect throughout the department. Behind him, Chief Angela Morrison emerged from the second vehicle, a tall black woman in her early 60s whose reputation for fairness was matched only by her reputation for not tolerating nonsense from anyone. Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her, followed immediately by embarrassment. She didn't want to be the officer who needed rescuing. She didn't want to be the one causing a scene that required the chief of police to show up at a public park. But here they were. Torres reached her first, his eyes doing a quick scan to make sure she was okay. "Richardson," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You all right?" "Yes, sir," Maya replied. "I'm fine. Titan and Nova are fine. We were just walking in the park when—" "I know what happened," Torres cut her off. "Chen filled me in on the radio." He turned to look at Dawson, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Where is he?" Sergeant Chen stepped forward. "Over there, Captain." Officer Dawson and his partner Martinez. Chief Morrison had caught up now, her expression unreadable but her presence commanding immediate attention. Every officer in the vicinity straightened up a little, even the ones who weren't directly involved. That was the effect the chief had on people. "Someone want to explain to me," Morrison said, her voice calm but carrying an edge like a knife. "Why I'm standing in a public park on a Wednesday morning because one of my officers was harassed while walking her dogs on her day off." Nobody seemed eager to answer that question. Dawson opened his mouth, but Morrison held up a hand, silencing him before he could speak. "Actually, don't answer that yet. I want to hear from witnesses first." She turned to the crowd of civilians who had remained. "Who saw what happened here from the beginning?" The retired attorney stepped forward again, still holding his phone. "I did, Chief. I recorded most of it. That officer there," he pointed at Dawson, "approached this woman without cause, refused to look at her credentials when she offered them, lied about receiving a call, and escalated the situation when she was doing absolutely nothing wrong. It was textbook harassment." "Can you send me that video?" Morrison asked. "Already done," the man replied. "Sent it to Sergeant Chen a few minutes ago." Morrison nodded and turned to Chen. "Play it." The next few minutes were excruciating for Maya, watching the encounter play back, hearing Dawson's accusations, seeing her own frustration mount, watching Titan and Nova react to protect her. It all looked even worse on video than it had felt in the moment, and Maya could see everyone else's reactions too. Torres's jaw got tighter and tighter as the video played. Martinez looked like he might be sick. Even the other officers who had responded to the backup call looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight and avoiding eye contact. When the video ended, Morrison handed the phone back to Chen. "Thank you, Sergeant. Now, Officer Dawson, you want to tell me what you were thinking?" Dawson had regained some of his composure, but his voice was defensive. "Chief, I was doing my job. We patrol this park regularly, and I saw someone who looked out of place with 2 large dogs running loose. I made a judgment call to investigate." "She wasn't out of place," Morrison said flatly. "She was in a public park, and the dogs weren't running loose. They were under complete voice control, which anyone with K9 training would have immediately recognized." "I couldn't have known she was really a police officer," Dawson protested. "Anyone can buy a fake badge." "She offered to show you her credentials multiple times," Torres interjected, his voice hard. "You refused to look at them. You also refused to call her precinct for verification, which would have taken all of 2 minutes. Instead, you escalated to calling for backup and treating one of my best officers like a criminal." Morrison turned to Martinez. "And you, Officer Martinez, what's your part in this?" Martinez looked miserable. "I should have spoken up sooner, ma'am. I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't. I should have said something." "Yes, you should have," Morrison agreed. "Being new doesn't excuse staying silent when you witness misconduct." The word misconduct hung in the air. It was official now. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or a mistake in judgment. The chief of police had just labeled Dawson's actions as misconduct in front of multiple witnesses. Maya watched several emotions play across Dawson's face. Anger, denial, and finally something that might have been fear. He had to know what was coming next. Morrison turned back to Maya. "Sergeant Richardson, I want to apologize on behalf of the entire department. What happened to you today never should have occurred. You're a decorated officer with an exemplary record, and you deserved better than this." "Thank you, Chief," Maya said quietly. The apology was nice, but it didn't erase what had happened. It didn't change the fact that she'd been profiled, harassed, and treated like a threat in broad daylight while doing something as simple as walking her dogs. "I also want you to know," Morrison continued, "that this incident will be thoroughly investigated. Officer Dawson will be placed on immediate administrative leave pending the outcome of that investigation." Dawson exploded. What? You can't do that. I was doing my job. I was protecting the community. You were harassing a fellow officer based on nothing more than her appearance, Morrison shot back, her voice like steel. And based on what I'm hearing and seeing, this may not be the first time you've engaged in this kind of behavior. Internal Affairs will be looking into your entire record. This is ridiculous, Dawson sputtered. I've been on this force for 20 years. I've got commendations, cleared cases. And now you have a formal complaint for racial profiling and misconduct, Torres said. Badge and gun, Dawson. Right now. For a moment, Maya thought Dawson might actually refuse. His face had gone from red to purple and his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. But eventually, with jerky, angry movements, he unclipped his badge and removed his service weapon. Handing them to Sergeant Chen, Martinez was watching all of this with wide eyes, probably wondering if his career was about to end before it really began. Morrison seemed to read his thoughts. Officer Martinez, she said, turning to him, you'll be placed on probation and required to complete additional training, including bias awareness and ethical decision-making courses. You made a poor choice today by staying silent, but you eventually did the right thing by telling the truth. Learn from this. Yes, ma'am, Martinez said, his voice shaky. Thank you, ma'am. Morrison looked around at all the assembled officers. Let me be crystal clear about something. This department does not tolerate discrimination of any kind, whether it's directed at civilians or at our own people. If any of you have a problem with that, there's the door. We'll help you find it. Nobody said a word. Torres put a hand on Maya's shoulder. Come on, Richardson. Let's get you out of here. You've dealt with enough for one day. Maya nodded, grateful for the excuse to leave. She gave a subtle command, and Titan and Nova immediately fell into step beside her. As they walked toward Torres's SUV, several of the bystanders who had witnessed everything started clapping. It started with the retired attorney, then the young woman who had offered her video, then others who had stayed to see justice done. It was a small thing, but it made Maya's throat tight with emotion. Torres drove her back to her car, neither of them saying much. What was there to say? They both knew the system, knew how these things worked. Dawson would probably be fired eventually, after the investigation ran its course. Martinez might turn into a good cop if he learned from this. The department would implement new policies, new training programs, new oversight measures. But would it actually change anything? Would it stop the next officer from making assumptions based on skin color? Would it prevent the next person from being harassed for looking out of place in a public space? Maya didn't know. She wanted to believe it would, but experience had made her skeptical. You did good today, Richardson, Torres said as they pulled up next to her car. You kept your cool, you protected yourself and your dogs, and you made sure the truth came out. That takes strength. Didn't feel strong, Maya admitted. Felt scared. And angry. Really angry. You're allowed to be angry, Torres said. What happened to you was wrong. Being a cop doesn't mean you have to accept being treated like that. Maya nodded, but she wasn't sure she believed him. In a lot of ways, being a cop made situations like this even more complicated. She was supposed to be part of the Brotherhood, part of the thin blue line. But when that line turned against her, where did that leave her? She got out of Torres's SUV and opened her own car door. Titan and Nova jumped into the back seat, finally relaxing now that they were in familiar territory. Maya sat in the driver's seat for a moment, not starting the engine, just breathing. Her phone buzzed with a text from Torres. Take the rest of the week off. That's an order, not a suggestion. Maya almost laughed. A week off. Like a few days would somehow erase what had happened. Would somehow make her forget the feeling of being treated like a criminal for existing in the wrong place. But maybe it would help. Maybe some time away from uniforms and badges and the complicated mess of being a black woman in law enforcement would give her some perspective, or maybe it would just give her more time to think about all the times this had happened before, and all the times it might happen again. 3 weeks had passed since that morning in the park. 3 weeks that had felt like a lifetime. Maya sat in her living room scrolling through her phone while Titan and Nova dozed on either side of her on the couch. The video from the park had gone viral. Not just locally, but nationally. Millions of views, thousands of comments. News outlets had picked it up, running stories with headlines like, Police officer racially profiled while off duty, and K9s protect handler from fellow officers. Her phone rang for what felt like the 100th time that day. Another interview request, probably. She'd done a few already, though she wasn't sure if talking about it helped or just kept reopening the wound. But Chief Morrison had encouraged her to share her story, said it was important for people to understand that these issues existed even within law enforcement. This call wasn't from a reporter, though. It was from Torres Richardson, he said when she answered. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay, Captain," she replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Ready to come back to work, honestly. Sitting at home is driving me crazy." "Good, because I need you back. We've got 2 new K9s starting training next week, and I want you to help with their evaluation." He paused. "But that's not why I'm calling. Can you come down to the station tomorrow morning? There's something you need to see." Maya's stomach tightened. "What kind of something?" "The good kind," Torres said. "Trust me. 10 o'clock? I'll be there." The next morning, Maya put on her uniform for the first time since the incident. It felt strange, like putting on clothes that belonged to someone else. She'd always been proud to wear this uniform, proud of what it represented, but now it felt complicated in ways she couldn't quite explain. Titan and Nova sensed her mood and stayed close as she got ready, offering their silent support. These dogs had been through everything with her. They'd seen her at her best and her worst, and they never judged, never questioned, never doubted her. When she arrived at the station, Torres was waiting for her in the lobby. "Come on," he said, leading her toward the community room. "Everyone's waiting." "Everyone?" Maya asked, confused. Torres just smiled and opened the door. The room was packed. Officers from her unit, people from other precincts, even Chief Morrison was there. But what caught Maya's attention were the civilians. Dozens of them, filling the back half of the room. She recognized some faces from the park that day. The retired attorney, the young woman who'd offered her video, others she didn't know but who looked at her with expressions of respect and gratitude. "What is this?" Maya whispered. "This," Chief Morrison said, stepping forward, "is a community meeting, something we should have been doing a long time ago." She gestured for Maya to come to the front of the room. "But first we have some business to take care of." Maya walked to the front, feeling self-conscious with all those eyes on her. Titan and Nova, who had come with her as always, positioned themselves on either side of her chair. Morrison addressed the room. 3 weeks ago, one of our officers experienced something that never should have happened. Sergeant Maya Richardson was racially profiled and harassed by a member of this department while simply walking her dogs in a public park. That incident sparked a necessary conversation about bias, accountability, and what kind of police department we want to be. She paused, letting her words sink in. "Officer Dawson's employment with this department has been terminated, effective immediately. The investigation found multiple instances of discriminatory behavior throughout his career, complaints that were not properly addressed by his supervisors. That ends now." There was some murmuring in the room. Maya noticed a few officers who didn't look happy about the decision, but most seemed to accept it, even support it. "More importantly," Morrison continued, "we're implementing comprehensive changes.
Every officer in this department will undergo mandatory bias training.
We're establishing a civilian oversight board to review complaints of discrimination, and we're creating a mentorship program to support officers who experience discrimination from within our own ranks." The retired attorney raised his hand. "Chief Morrison, those are good steps. But how do we know they'll actually be enforced? How do we know this isn't just talk to make the situation go away?" Morrison nodded as if she'd been expecting the question. "Fair point. That's why the Civilian Oversight Board will have real power, including the ability to recommend disciplinary action. And that's why we're committing to quarterly public reports on our progress. Transparency and accountability. That's what this department needs." A woman in the back stood up. She was young, black, probably in her early 20s. "I want to say something," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I've been stopped by police in this city 4 times in the past year. Every single time I was doing nothing wrong. I was scared to file complaints because I didn't think anyone would believe me or care." She looked directly at Maya. "But seeing what happened to you, and seeing that the department actually did something about it, that gives me hope. Thank you for speaking up." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you for sharing that," she managed to say. "And I'm sorry that happened to you. It shouldn't have." More people started sharing their stories. A middle-aged man talked about being followed by an officer through his own neighborhood. A teenager described being questioned aggressively while waiting for the bus. Each story was a reminder of how widespread the problem was, how many people had been affected by the same kind of prejudice Maya had experienced. But there were also officers sharing stories. A Latino officer talked about comments he'd endured from colleagues. An Asian American woman described being told by a training instructor that she'd never make it in law enforcement. These weren't just problems between police and community. They were problems within the force itself. Torres stood up and addressed the room. "I've been a cop for 30 years, he said. And I'll be honest, I didn't always see these issues clearly. I thought if we just did our jobs well, treated people fairly, that would be enough. But what happened to Richardson showed me that it's not enough to just not be racist. We have to actively work against racism, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means calling out people we've worked with for years." He looked at Martinez, who was sitting in the third row looking uncomfortable but attentive. "Officer Martinez is here today because he made a mistake, but he also eventually did the right thing. He's going through additional training, and he's agreed to share his experience with other officers as part of our new program, because we all need to learn from this." Martinez stood up, clearly nervous. "I want to apologize directly to Sergeant Richardson," he said. "I should have spoken up immediately when I knew what Dawson was doing was wrong. I was scared of going against a senior officer, but that's no excuse. I'm working to be better to do better." Maya appreciated the apology, though it didn't erase what had happened. But it was something. A start. After the meeting, people came up to talk to Maya one by one. Parents thanked her for bringing attention to the issue. Young officers, especially officers of color, told her she'd inspired them to speak up about their own experiences. Kids asked to pet Titan and Nova, their eyes wide with wonder at the beautiful dogs. One little girl, maybe 8 years old, tugged on her mother's sleeve and pointed at Maya. "Mom, I want to be like her when I grow up," she said. Maya knelt down to the girl's level. "Yeah, you want to be a K9 officer?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "I want to help people and have a dog partner. That's the best job ever." Maya smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time in weeks. "You know what? It really is. It's hard sometimes, and you have to be brave, but it's worth it." "Are you brave?" the girl asked with the kind of directness only children possess. Maya thought about it. Was she brave? She'd been scared that day in the park. She was still scared sometimes, uncertain about what the future held, whether things would really change. "I'm trying to be," she finally answered. "And you know what I learned? Being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared." The girl seemed to consider this seriously, then nodded. "Okay, I can do that." As Maya watched the girl skip away with her mother, she felt something shift inside her. Maybe everything that had happened wasn't just about her. Maybe it was about all the people who had experienced similar things but didn't have a badge to protect them. Didn't have viral videos to prove their innocence. Didn't have a chief of police willing to take action. Maybe her story could help change things for them. That evening, Maya returned to Riverside Park. She'd avoided it since the incident, but it was time to reclaim that space. To prove to herself that one bad experience wouldn't rob her of something she loved. As she walked the familiar paths with Titan and Nova, she noticed people looking at her. But this time the looks weren't suspicious or judgmental. They were respectful, even grateful. Several people waved or nodded hello. A few stopped to tell her they'd seen her story and thanked her for speaking out. An elderly couple approached with their golden retriever. "We wanted to thank you," the woman said. "Our grandson is black and we worry about him every day. Knowing there are officers like you gives us hope." They talked for a few minutes about dogs and training and the beautiful weather. Normal conversation. Normal interaction. Exactly what Maya had wanted that morning 3 weeks ago when this all started. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Maya found herself back at the spot where everything had happened. The place where Dawson had confronted her, where Titan and Nova had protected her, where her life had changed. She stood there for a moment, remembering. The fear, the anger, the frustration, but also the support that had followed. The strangers who had recorded the truth. The community that had rallied around her. The department that had, however imperfectly, tried to do the right thing. Change was slow. Change was hard. But it was possible. Titan pressed against her leg and Nova sat at her feet. Her partners. Her family. Her constant support through everything. "Come on, you two," Maya said, her voice strong and clear. "Let's go home." And as they walked back to the car together, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not because everything was fixed or perfect, but because she'd stood up for herself and others. Because she'd survived something difficult and come out stronger. Because she knew that her story mattered. The fight wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead, more moments when she'd have to be brave, more times when she'd have to speak up even when it was hard. But she wasn't alone. And that made all the difference.